Thank you for your patience. Ви благодариме на присуството и трпението. We'll start in a few minutes. We have some people coming in just to accommodate that. And thank you. So we will be starting very shortly. Да. Thank you for your participation in the second day of the International Conference Civic-centric Digital Transformation, which is conducted by Metamorphosis Foundation and partners as part of the European Union supported project ICEDA, or increasing civic engagement in the digital agenda in the Western Balkans. Today with us we have three distinguished speakers who will talk on the first topic of the day. It's how to build resilience to hybrid warfare. We chose this topic because it overlaps with many of the issues related to creating a civic-centered approach towards using the new technologies and to reaping the benefits of all the developments in the technical and the social sphere that we have thanks to this digitalization, but also having in mind various kinds of threats which in the last few years seem to have coalesced under the term of hybrid warfare or special war as different foreign malign influence in conjunction with local proxies have been threatening the development of democracies not only in Western Balkans but in a far wider context, both in Europe and abroad, exploiting the various kinds of divisions and polarizations within the societies. Today with us, we have three distinguished speakers who will provide both perspectives from North Macedonia and in much wider context. With us are Ilija Županovski, Digital Communications Associate from the Office of the Prime Minister of the Republic of North Macedonia, Mr. Alexander Racev, head of the National Center for Computer Incident Response, or MCDAT-CIRT, and Mrs. Merle Megre, sorry if I'm from who is a cybersecurity program director at the e-governments academy in Estonia, one of the partners of the ICEDA project. So without much, I will just explain the structure of the sessions. We will have a brief introductory speeches by all three speakers, and then we will open for discussion, both through questions from the moderator, but you, the audience, will be able to share their questions and comments too, if time allows, and have our speakers share their experiences and insight at a particular issues. But at the moment, we will start with a short introductory speeches. First will be Mr. Županovski, who has been serving the country since 2017 as part of the cabinet of the Prime Minister in charge of digital communications, and has been instrumental in he has been participating in many of our events where both the civil society and the state institutions and other stakeholders have been working particularly on the issues related to use of digital technologies and fighting disinformation. But we are very happy to hear what he can share from the perspective of the institution on the overall term of hybrid warfare. So we get, please, Mr. Županovski.
Филип, поздрав до сите присутни кои го следат овој настан. Поздрав до соговорниците Ацеп и Мерле. Задоволство ми е да присуствувам на овој панел. Јас со оглед што говорам на настан во Скопје во име на владата и говорам на македонски, се надевам дека сите драги гости од странство кои се тука ќе имаат прилика да ме следат преку обезбедениот превод. Се посериозни се предизвиците со кои се справува нашето општество, поврзани со така наречената хибридна војна или користење на комбинации на неконвенционални средства кои може да направат одредено политичко, економско и безбедносно влијание во општеството. Дел од тие средства се и дезинформациите и сајбер нападите. Овие алатки имаат една заедничка цел: да ја подкопаат демократијата, да предизвикаат недоверба на граѓаните во институциите на системот, во медиумите и во граѓанскиот сектор. Например, лажните дојави за бомби во училиштата, уште поконкретно, имаа за цел и да предизвикаат психолошки страв, паника и нервоза кај децата и родителите, кои секојдневно се соочуваат со шокот дека во нивното училиште можеби има бомба тој ден, а исцрпувачки беа и за органите на редот и мирот, кои што секојдневно го спроведува протоколот на проверки и на евакуација на децата. Знаеме дека во некои денови имаше над 100 дојави за лажни дојави за бомби и тоа беше навистина голем предизвик за сите. Ова иста алатка која и сама по себе е дезинформација, знаејќи дека информацијата за поставена бомба во училиштата за среќа беше навистина во сите случаи. Ја видовме во нашето соседство, како во Хрватска, во Црна Гора, во Србија, а минатата недела имавме прилика да видиме дека засилено се случува и во Бугарија пред нивните парламентарни избори во неделата. Од позиција на денес, драго ни е што ситуацијата е подсмирена и што покажа резултати мерките на оперативниот тим на Советот за безбедноста разузнавачката заедница. Мерки во насока на јакнење на дигитализацијата и јакнење на физичката безбедност во училиштата. Сега се префрла малку на сајбер нападите. каде исто, нажалост, можеме да констатираме дека во се поголем број ни се случува во изминатиот период. Една од главните работи за заштита на институциите од сајбер нападите е градење на отпорноста кај јавните институции, кој се почесто се цел на сајбер нападите, а чија цел е оневозможување на системите кои даваат услуги кон граѓаните. Токму затоа во февруари оваа година владата усвои сет итни мерки за градење на отпорност и сајбер заштита на институциите на јавниот сектор, голем дел и предлози на ЦИРТот, по серијата активности за координација со донаторите и чинителите во областа на сајбер безбедноста во државата. Во моментов МИО работи, Министерството за информатичко општество работи на финализирање на новата национална 4-годишна стратегија за сајбер безбедност, втора стратегија поред, а владата работи на финализирање на новиот закон за безбедност на информациони мрежи и информациони системи, со кој ќе се изедначиме со регулативата на ЕУ. Во овој закон е предвидено и формирање на оперативно тело, кој што досега сме го немале, кој што беше запишано и во претходната стратегија, оперативно тело кое ќе раководи со имплементација на стратегијата и се надеваме дека со конечно формирање на ова оперативно тело дека ќе се засили градењето на отпорноста кај јавните институции. Овде морам да истакнам дека силна и поддршката од меѓународните партнери кои ни помагаат во справувањето со сајбер предизвиците, за што сакам јавно и да се заблагодарам. Например, само со e-Governance Академијата од Естонија, од каде доаѓа и Мерле, во изминатите 6 месеци имавме 5 обуки за градење на капацитетите на државни службеници во различни институции, а уште 3 обуки ни предстојат во следните 2 месеци. Во врска пак со дезинформациите, кои што сакам да ги опфатам на крајот од моето обраќање, истите засилено започнаа да се појавуваат пред референдумот за Преспанскиот договор, беа силно присутни за време на пристапувањето во НАТО, за време на ковид кризата, каде многу граѓани се одлучија да не се вакцинираат и со тоа си го загрозија своето здравје, за време на Францускиот договор и се до денес кога се решава обезбедувањето на нашето продолжување на преговорите со ЕУ. Владата за прв пат во јули 2019 излезе со некаков првичен план за справување со дезинформациите, кој го нарековме предлог план за одлучна акција против ширење на дезинформациите и нападите на демократијата. Бевме меѓу првите влади кои во 2019 да излезе со некаков сеопфатен план за справување со дезинформациите и ја издигна оваа тема на високо ниво. Планот представуваше некаква рамка на која идејата беше да се надоградуваат предлози за механизми за справување со дезинформациите, отворена за идеи за сите чинители во општеството. Бидејќи во борбата со дезинформации е важно да се вклучени и медиумите, и медиумските организации, и граѓанскиот сектор и сите кои работат на оваа тема. Дел од работите кои се однесува на институциите во тој план веќе се спроведува, дел се спроведуваат, но и поради ковидот никогаш не успеавме да седнеме на маса со сите чинители и да продолжиме да разговараме, да го надополнуваме и имплементираме тој план заедно. Па некои го оценија планот за неуспешен, бидејќи не успел да обедини целата заедница да се мобилизира. Но овде сакам со големо задоволство да соопштам една нова информација, дека пред неколку недели на адреса на владата стигна иницијатива од поголема група на домашни организации со конкретни препораки за справување со дезинформациите. И минатата недела конечно остваривме состанок на кој владата со задоволство прифати да се вклучи во иницијативата и со прифаќање на предлозите како добра основа за разговор, се надеваме дека многу брзо ќе влеземе во процес на креирање на некаков национален план. Формата се надевам дека ќе одредиме на наследниот состанок. И кај оваа тема сакам на крај да напоменам дека високо е нивото на мобилизација на целата меѓународна заедница во борбата со дезинформациите, вмрежувањето и взаимната поддршка во справување со истите, како на владино ниво, соработки со социјалните мрежи и соработки со граѓанскиот сектор и организациите. Вчера имавме можност да ја чуеме изјавата на генералниот секретар на НАТО Столтенберг, кој изјави дека НАТО обезбедува помош и поддршка за Северна Македонија, која се состои во техничка поддршка и посилна соработка за борба против дезинформациите. Со ова ќе го завршам обраќањето и се извинувам што излегов малку од моите 5 минути.
Благодарам, господин Жупановски. I will give the floor to Mr. Racev from Makacirt, who will share his very current information about cybersecurity threats, and of course we will continue with the issue of disinformation also in the discussion. Thank you.
Добър ден на сите. Благодарност пред организатора до Метаморфозис за поканата и укажаната чест за учество на овој настан. Мислам дека сте едни од ретките од државата кои што континуирано работи на подобрување на едукација и зголемување на јавна свест, кога станува збор за информацијска безбедност и теми поврзани со тоа. Благодарност би сакал да искажам исто така и до владата, пред се од аспект на мерките кои што ги спомна секако или следходно и поддршката која што ни ја даваат во пружање на, би рекол, тоа се проактивни услуги на МКД-ЦИРТ во насока на едукација, на предсе на стручните служби во склоп на владините тела и организациите од јавниот сектор, меѓутоа и поддршката секако во подигање на јавната свест и едукација на граѓаните, пред се преку онлайн обуките, за кои што можам да ви кажам во овој момент дека имаме над 3000 би рекол службеници или вработени од јавна администрација кои што успешно веќе завршиле почетна обука за сајбер безбедност. Исто така голема благодарност и до Governance Academy и до Мерле, особено за поддршката во организирање и спроведување на специјализирани обуки од областта на сајбер безбедност. Веќе имаме поминато 2 групи од вкупно 20 лица, стручни лица од организации од владин и од јавен сектор, кои што преку овие високо специјализирани обуки се надеваме дека ќе дадат добар придонес и ќе помогнат во заштитата и сајбер безбедноста на организациите од каде што доаѓаат, а секако на тој начин и заеднички колективно ќе помогнат во подобрување на сајбер безбедносната состојба во државата. Јас припремив неколку слайдови поврзани токму со сајбер нападите со кои што се соочуваме во државата. Може само слайдот или не знам следниот го пуштите. Да знам се пробав и овака, ама неки. Добро, говорете, работи. Значи, ова е само, би сакал само на кратко во контекст на оно што ни се случува во државата од аспект на сајбер нападите и дезинформациите, сепак мислам од аспект на оно што е пријавено кај нас во МКД-ЦИРТ, како најчест вектор, така наречен вектор или начин на спроведување на заканите и нападите и понатаму обстојуваат фишинг пораките. Ова е последната во низа на пораки, би рекол фишинг пораки, кои што може да влијаат негативно преку вознемирување на лицата на граѓаните, на примателите и преку стварање на некое чувство на нелагодност и незадоволство од оно што го работат организациите. Секако дека станува збор за лажна порака, со лажно представување и со злоупотреба на некои надворешни, во најголем број случаи на злоупотреба на надворешни мејл сервери преку кои што се испраќаат овие пораки. И сега тука би сакал да напоменам дека од аспект на услугите на МКД-ЦИРТ ние делуваме реактивно и проактивно. Ова е случај на реактивна услуга, односно одговор по пријава на инцидент или по пријава на закана. Оно што ние можеме да го направиме и го правиме во овој случај е доколку се достави до нас порака со ваква содржина, лажна фишинг порака, ние ќе направиме се што е во наша можност да се блокира испраќачот и понатаму да се проследат информациите до другите организации кои што треба и се чинители во рамката за сајбер безбедност на државата, пред се МВР. Во таа насока најавувам дека сме во процес на дефинирање или усвојување на стандардна оперативна процедура за соработка помеѓу МКД и секторот за компјутерски криминал и дигитална форензика во склоп на Министерството за внатрешни работи, со што ќе се воспостави поблиска соработка, средина каде што ќе може да се разменуваат осетливи информации и побрзо да се реагира. Токму тоа е еден од, да речеме, една од работите или дел од она што ние треба да го работиме, а тоа е да ја подобруваме комуникацијата помеѓу сите чинители во областа на сајбер безбедност на државата. Од аспект на оваквите работи, како што е овој пример, може релативно едноставно да се поправат и да се подобри ситуацијата преку уведување на технички мерки и секако организацијски. На линкот имате пример за портал кој што ние го возможуваме за сите организации. Сега малце доле е пишано, меѓутоа се надевам дека сепак ќе може да го забележите и секако повеќе информации на нашиот сајт ќе најдете. Значи станува збор за уведување на технички мерки кај системите за електронска пошта, особено во government делот, доколку се имплементираат на многу едноставен и брз начин, ќе можеме да го елиминираме така наречениот спуфинг, односно испраќање на мейлови во име на со лажно представување, во име на некој испречач на кој што ние реално му веруваме. Вториот пример е она што исто ни се случуваше синоќа, а тоа е, значи, повторно имаме ситуација на фишинг порака, уште една, со лажно представување во име на УЈП. Овие ваквите случаи може да влијат не само финансиски негативно за граѓаните и за институциите, меѓутоа влијат и на репутацијата на организацијата. Не само што се барат личните податоци, хакерите ставиле форма и да се соберат и податоци од кредитни картички, па дури и да се направи аплоуд на скен од личната карта. За жал, во државата се уште немаме задолжително пријавување на инциденти. Тоа се надевам, како што кажа претходно и Илија, дека со новиот закон и новата стратегија ќе се обезбеди, така што барем целта е да добиеме по-јасна слика за, например, за опсегот на оваквите напади. Кои институции биле опфатени, кои се таргетирани и кои се жртвите. Проблем од аспект на нешто што сме го идентификували, нешто на што треба да работиме во државата, тоа е подобра и побрза координација и комуникација помеѓу организациите во државата. Примерот со лажниот сајт на МКХост за УЈП кажува дека самиот домен е регистриран пред точно всушност 2 месеци. И тоа е регистриран кај македонски регистрант. Мора да најдеме начин да ја подобриме соработката и довербата помеѓу организациите во државата, зашто е можно побрзо да реагираме на оваквите ситуации. Тоа е на левата страна, на десната страна имате лажен домен кој што во моментот е во состојба на така наречен паркиран домен, значи не се користи. Меѓутоа доменот има име mvr.mk. Ние сме направиле, например, неколку обиди да го стигнеме овој домен. Проблемот е во тоа што во моментов од него нема никаква малициозна или штетна активност. Меѓутоа тоа не значи дека собственикот на овој момент буквално во секој момент може да иницира фишинг кампања со лажно представување како да е пораката испратена од МВР. Мора да најдеме, ова го потенцирам како еден од, да речеме, по-воочливи проблеми, а кои што реално би требало да можеме многу едноставно да ги решаваме со подобра, поблиска соработка и со зголемена доверба меѓу организациите. Ова се уште само него го слайдови од аспект на дезинформацијата согласно испитување на јавно мислење што го направивме минатата година во периодот септември и октомври. Најголем број од граѓаните информациите за она што ги добиваат преку интернет, многу малку од работа или од пријателите, така да тука и таргетот каде што треба се работи да се работи нели за справување со дезинформациите, меѓутоа и другите мали проценти укажуваат сепак на можноста или она што би се рекло opportunity за подобрување и каде треба исто така да се работи. Ова е исто проблем затоа што на некаде околу 60% од граѓаните се согласува дека нивните лични податоци не се чуваат безбедно кај организациите од јавниот сектор и ова е повторно нешто што треба се работи. Ова е само на кратко линк кон обуките кои што ги спомнав. Препоракувам сите да ги следите обуките, да споделите оваа информација со вашите колеги, пријатели и фамилија. Толку јас тука би завршил и би замолил да секоја фишинг или сумнителна порака или секој инцидент да го пријавите кај нас. Ова е нашиот вебсайт и ова е имејлот на кој што може да ги пријавите. Ви благодарам.
Thank you, Mr. Racov. Without further ado, I would invite Ms. Megre to present the experience of her work on cybersecurity within the e-Governance Academy from Tallinn, Estonia. The e-Governance Academy has been present and friend of our country since the beginning of this century. Metamorphosis has cooperated with the Academy since 2004 when we were engaged together with various local stakeholders in creation of the first national strategy for information society development. And it was based on the experience of Estonia, which even at that time had the reputation of the most cyber advanced country in Europe. And in the last 2 years, the Academy has worked in the Western Balkans region in particular and in other regions and assessing the threat to cybersecurity. So please provide us with both your insight, which are also part of the geopolitical context, having in mind that Estonia has also the experience of being one of the first targets of cyber warfare in the last few decades which it successfully overcame.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here to Skopje, and it is a real pleasure to be back here, to be here on the invitation of Metamorphosis, because this is a cooperation with you that is close to our heart at the E-Governance Academy. But of course, more generally, we have been thrilled to be part and to be engaged in various digital, but more specifically cybersecurity related developments and capacity building here in the region, and more particularly here in Macedonia. Additionally, I must say that the topic of hybrid warfare personally is a passion of mine for at least a decade. So I've been writing about this and thinking about this a lot, and I'd like to share a few thoughts on this with you today as well. So I'll try to cram my many thoughts into the 5 minutes. Maybe I'll go over with 1 minute or two. I'd like to generally raise 3 points. I think it's important first, perhaps, to establish what do we mean by hybrid warfare. Second, I'd like to describe a little bit how I see, from the Estonian perspective, hybrid warfare in practice today. And thirdly, then, a look at some of the lessons learned on how to build resilience against hybrid warfare, more particularly cyber warfare here in Macedonia. So what do we mean first by hybrid warfare? The US Marine Corps has put out a definition about 20 years ago for a hybrid threat, saying that a hybrid threat is characteristic of situations where the adversary is employing complex and violent combinations, pretty broad. A little more specific was perhaps the former US Chief of Staff of the United States Army, General Raymond Odierno, who said that hybrid warfare for him means operating environments with both regular and irregular warfare, where you have paramilitary and civilian adversaries along with the regular military forces with the potential of terrorism, criminality, and other complications. So in short, by hybrid warfare, what he meant is that there are both state and non-state actors together in the warfare, in the war theater. And let us underline, this is nothing new. The concept of hybrid warfare goes back in far beyond a decade, far beyond 2 decades, with the military history including numerous examples of a combination of regular and irregular warfare. Coming from Estonia, we look very closely at Russia. Russia, since 1920s, has developed a concept which they call masked warfare or maskirovka, which included numerous active and passive measures designed to deceive the enemy and influence the opinion-making process in the West. They did that back in 1920s. We saw that happening in Estonia, and that was not the only place. Over the course of the history, for example, during the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan in 1979, it all began by hybrid tactics when 700 Soviet troops dressed in Afghan uniforms seized key military administrative buildings in Kabul. And if we think back of what happened in Crimea 2014, where there were insignialess paramilitary there, it very much resembles that. So throughout the history, there is not much new. The Estonian Internal Security Police, in their annual yearbook that they published internationally, both in Estonian and in English, back in 2012 already, said when describing the hybrid tactics used by the Russian special services, saying that this very much compares to the good old KGB-style operations, where activities are aimed at changing another country's decision makers, state authorities, voters during elections, or media, aiming at changing those target groups' decisions and behavior and attitudes. This includes diplomacy, information, military power, economic influence, covert operations by special services, as well as attempts to corrupt people by offering money. All of that concept, they wrote then, is a good old Russian traditional KGB-style influence operations. So basically what we're seeing, nothing new, but very much what's been applied already, and it's useful to look at history so that to be able to recognize that. How does hybrid warfare look in practice? I think the Russian military thinking of hybrid warfare has really in its entirety put in practice in Ukraine between 2014 and 2022. A combination of regular and irregular forces, economic sanctions, energy blockades, political destabilization, information warfare, attempts to influence the elections, financial pressure, and cyber attacks all have been employed by the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Estonia is no exception to this. And yes, you mentioned the attacks back in 2007, but I would bring it back to more recent. Today, there is a war in Europe, and we are all directly affected. From March 22 last year, the Estonian State Information Systems Agency, which is the national competent authority in Estonia for cybersecurity, we say in RIA in Estonian, they have been on high alert because they have been under attack by state-sponsored criminal groups. There have been increased attacks. There were increased attacks in Estonia last April and last August. For example, on average, Estonian state has some 12 intense DDoS service blocking attacks per month. Last April and last August, they were 65. So there is this constant pressure throughout. And lastly, how to build resilience and what can we do? There are a number of things, and partly indeed as an attempt to apply these lessons learned here in Macedonia, the E-Governance Academy is implementing EU projects. Currently, an EU rapid response in cybersecurity aimed towards Albania, Montenegro, and North Macedonia, but also a new EU project starting very soon, focusing on all Western Balkan 6 partners, aiming at building more cybersecurity and cyber capacity. From what's going on currently, I would perhaps, and looking at where the gaps are here, I would perhaps outline 3 main points, but there is, of course, resonating and amplifying what colleagues said here, where more attention needs to be. So first, I would say there is a need to focus on the cybersecurity, to recognize the digital and cyber as foreign policy actors in shaping national positions and addressing issues such as, for example, the application of international law in cyberspace. So this means that cyber, in addition to, of course, being very much the business of the CERT and the government, also should be something that is on the table for the foreign ministry and the foreign policy actors. And there's a need for them to cooperate with like-minded countries within the EU and NATO when sharing information and when identifying and possibly attributing some state-sponsored attacks. So for that, it's important to know what the international law, how international law applies in cyberspace, and how foreign policy actors can and need to cooperate closely in cyber and in digital affairs. This is already happening very much at EU level. There's national cybersecurity ambassadors and nominated within MFAs, national digital ambassadors. They all work together at EU and NATO format. So there's a need to join that, I would say, that platform from here as well. Another definitely lesson learned from what's going on in Ukraine is the need to cooperate between the private sector and the state sector, public-private partnership. Because when we look at what's happened in Ukraine, it's very often the private sector that knows and has the skills and knowledge about threat intelligence, about ways to support the state, like Microsoft, Symantec, Mandiant, and many other international companies. So a closer cooperation and a structured partnership between the state and the private sector, and ideally also between the state and the civil society, is very important here. To have a regular platform, and this is something that is already existing here in Macedonia, but needs further investment, I would say, and effort. And lastly, what's also already here but needs constant training is the crisis management mechanisms at the government side at times of cyber crisis. Who's in charge, how indeed different agencies work together, knowledge of how to authorize, who is in charge of authorizing decisions, whom do you cooperate with, how much time do you need for adopting decisions, and how transparent are you with these decisions with a wider audience? Do you take a proactive press and strategic communication, sometimes it makes sense to not speak about every little detail because the enemy is listening as well. So these questions are useful to think through and regularly train in practice in simulated attacks. So I'll stop here. Sorry for going over time, but happy to continue over Q&A.
Thank you so much. It is very important to get the lessons of history because, like you said, the hybrid warfare is not something new. And even in this country or in the Western Balkans, this concept has been known in the past and has been part of the education system as part of civil defense curriculum as special warfare. And it also, this education especially focused on the roles of propaganda and on the roles of misinformation and disinformation as something that directly affects the citizens and something which they can individually also take action against. This is the new iteration of this problem that we face today falls a lot within this sphere because both the research done and the monitoring and the debunking activity that has been done by Metamorphosis and its partners through various regional initiatives, primarily through the Western Balkans Anti-Disinformation Hub project, which is supported by the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and at national level through the activities for fact-checking that are supported by a National Endowment for Democracy, show that the aspect of disinformation has been one of the most impactful aspects of hybrid warfare today. We were faced with numerous incidents, but also we see a combination of different types of hybrid warfare that can be identified across the spectrum that you covered today collectively. For instance, people who have been in a way trained to receive this information and to adopt a conspiracy thinking mindset, which makes them susceptible to more disinformation from the political side, are also targeted by hackers or by swindlers or by phishing enterprises, criminal enterprises, based on the developed attitudes through this perverse form of education through disinformation. So, for instance, people who are whose trust in the European integration process has been undermined are served with even advertisements on social networks about how the euro is going to be replaced by cyber currencies in Sweden or elsewhere, which is also very much in line with Russian efforts to undermine the reputation of different societies, especially those which are geographically close. And then they are served with phishing offers or cybersecurity related threats based on their previously misinformed outlook on life. And then they get into traps of hackers to give their personal information and their livelihood in this sector. So I would pose a question for all of you, but of course with a focus of a particular issue that you think is most important. Of what do you think is the most pertinent issue that the citizens should be aware of, and how would you recommend that they address this issue? For instance, Mr. Županovski mentioned the disinformation aspect, so we might start with him. Yes.
Благодарам, Филип. Добро, конкретно на прашањето што све можеме да направиме во борбата со дезинформациите. Ќе употребам еден илустративен опис на дезинформациите од мој соработник и експерт на оваа тема, кој вели: Дезинформациите се како лебарките. Никогаш не можат целосно да се уништат. Лебарките можат да преживеат и нуклеарна разорна сила. Тоа што може да се направи за да се отстранат лебарките е да им ги затвориме дупките и да им пуштиме светло. Истото и со дезинформациите. Треба да им пуштиме светло и да им ги затвориме вратите во домовите на граѓаните. Со светлото треба да ги разобличиме, треба да им ја дадеме вистината на граѓаните, т.е. да им покажеме како сами да ги препознаваат дезинформациите, за да не дозволат да влезат во нивниот дом и да направат и да им дозволат да направат штета. Штетото влијание на дезинформациите можеме да го намалиме секако само со серија на активности и само во услови каде што сите актери во општеството ќе бидат вклучени. Владата може тоа да го направи, институциите преку транспарентно и преку транспарентност и отвореност и преку проактивност во комуникацијата со граѓаните. Тоа може да се направи со брзо детектирање на дезинформациите и разобличување на неистите, со подигнување на свеста за постојањето на дезинформациите, сега преку кампањи, кои што може да го прават владата, медиумите, граѓанскиот сектор и така натаму. Преку проверка на фактите, на факт-чекерите кои работат во нашето општество, преку прибанкинг, уште пред да се појави дезинформацијата, за да се спречи да направи штета. Како во пример, например, кога владата на САД декласифицираше информација поврзана со разузнавачка информација дека Русија планира да употреби валкана бомба во Украина и да ја обвини за тоа Украина, која на крајот внесени случаи кога информацијата излезе во јавност. Ова се само седна на работи кои што можеме да ги направиме.
Благодарам. Во препораките кои што граѓанските организации ги упатија и за заеднички пристап за градење на отпорност кон дезинформација, се инсистира на системски пристап, на сеопфатна општествена акција и на вклучување на сите чинители. Господин Ацев, може вие и господја Мајгре да се надоврзете и од ваша перспектива на истата тема во Елет.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a lot loud. Yeah, indeed. Regarding disinformation, one additional aspect that is something we try to introduce in Estonia is to have this media literacy module added in the school civic class curriculum, so that children already would start having a critical approach to potential fake news and would learn how to have a better media literacy. Regarding cybersecurity, there are, of course, many ways, but I think one of the general things to underline here is this basic personal cyber hygiene that all of us can individually start applying, and then that can be taken at a high level, at organizational level, and of course needs to be taken at a more systematic level, at national level. So what do I mean by that? Is the good old general cyber hygiene requirements to lock your phone or laptop after use, to apply different passwords for different platforms, to regularly update the software for your computer and smartphone, to apply security software, to have backup files, to not open unknown letters, links or attachments, and try to avoid shared or public devices. Some very, very basic things. And then, of course, take it further from there. Thanks.
Значи само да допълнам, аз значи цел за съгласен с това, што го кажа предходните говорници и со вас дека потребен е системски пристъп, организиран пристъп на државата во овој дел, пред се во делот на реципиентите или примателите на информации, во нивна едукација, се извинувам, со цел да направат едуциран избор за подготовците информациите што ги примаат, дали се веродостојни или станува збор за дезинформација. Од аспект на оно што ние како чинители или како дел од таа, ја нарекол национална сајбербезбедносна рамка, зборам во името на МКДЦИР, може да го направиме и треба да го правиме. Се надевам дека повторно ќе напоменам, ќе работиме понатаму на подобрување на комуникацијата и кооперацијата со другите организации, нешто што потенцијално исто би помогнало и што го спомнав претходно, тоа е задолжителното пријавување на инциденти. И во тој контекст би кажал дека многу малку од пријавените инциденти, од тој мал број на пријавени инциденти, уште помал број е тие кои што имаат завршница. Односно, сме стигнале до таа последна фаза во одговор по инцидентите, а тоа е научени лекции и споделување на тие информации. Тоа за нас е основа за да може да се изгради или да се создаде стратешка информација за тоа од каде доаѓаат изворите, од каде се изворите на нападите, кој е мотивот на нападот и кои се целните групи. Тоа многу ќе помогне и во контекст на дезинформациите, од каде доаѓаат, меѓутоа и од аспект на сајбер нападите. Мораме да работиме да зголемиме видливоста на она што ни се случува и транспарентноста, сепак внимавајќи на она што го кажа и господин Мајки претходно, а тоа е дека треба да се едуцираат тие што објавуваат информации, што прават на information disclosure за одредени настани, например ако има одредени напади, која информација треба да се дистрибуира во кој момент од времето со цел и да се внимава да не се направи дополнително штета или да се зголеми ризик од проширување на напади, па дури до проширување или ескалација или поголем офат на дистрибуцијата на тие дезинформации.
Thank you. I would like to add the information that in North Macedonia, the process of updating the curriculum with media literacy content has been ongoing for several years. There is ongoing USA project called Youthing, which is working with the Ministry of Education on this aspect, and is also there is a national media literacy network, which is one of the few examples in the region where there is really a multi-stakeholder approach, including media organizations, various other topical NGOs, as well as state institutions and media outlets, including the public broadcaster. And this is all in line with different international initiatives such as UNESCO Media Literacy Week and so on. But also it's important to note that this, if we return to the broader concept of hybrid warfare, it's like was mentioned before, we see that there is big effect of this hybrid warfare even when it's not perceived as a foreign threat, such as with fake bomb threats, which have been, there has been an epidemic in the Western Balkans, and the research by ICEDA project showed that in the last few months since October, there were over 905 such incidents in North Macedonia only, in 8 cities, which were then further used for different types of manipulations intended to increase the divisions in society, including, for example, the disinformation that they only target Macedonian language schools, or that building into the narrative that Albanians are some kind of privileged, or implicating different interethnic overtones, which is in line with the practice of this hybrid warfare, which is trying to exploit all the ongoing disputes and also ongoing tensions, or how can I say, opportunities for conflict within each society. We see that this is also done at inter-country level. For instance, the the tensions between Serbia and Kosovo, Bulgaria and North Macedonia, also affecting Albania, which is part of the same package for EU integration with North Macedonia. So all these complications basically seem to serve one purpose: disrupting the democratic system and serving the interests of authoritarian or criminal regimes who would rather have Europe divided, Europe without a common voice, and without prosperity at the end. We have only a minute or two to wrap up. So I would like to invite for a closing sentence by each of you of what you think, anybody who you think is most important should do next in order to counter the threat of cyber warfare in our common continent. So please, for a closing sentence for all of you, and we wrap up.
Прво сметам дека овие дискусии на овие важни теми треба секако да продолжат и тука сакам да се заблагодарам што организиравте овој панел од метаморфозис. Тоа е прво нешто. Мислам дека треба да ја подигнеме свесноста на високо ниво и да разговараме се повеќе за овие работи кои што се случуваат. Се голем предизвик за справување и владата единствено би можела да се справи преку вклучување на сите чинители во општеството кои имаат знаење и капацитети да помогнат на оваа тема.
Well, to be sure, I think investing in training and education is probably the best kind of investment we can all make for ourselves, for our children, for the future.
Иначе, само би додал дека да, потребно е јакнење на капацитетите во институциите и се надам дека што побрзо ќе се донесе законската рамка која што ги идентификува сите чинители и одговорности за постапување и начин на работа, повторно во насока на подобрување на отпорноста на нашата држава.
Thank you, dear speakers. One of the key points in the recommendations for joint action was also that human rights should be also at the center of all efforts that are related to security, such as hybrid warfare and disinformation, are primarily security issues, but are also media issues, also civil society, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression issues. And the human rights should be at the core of all the systemic efforts to protect the people, because also safety and security are human rights per se. We will continue with thanks to your valuable contribution. We will invite the participants to continue the conversation with you also in the following conference activities. But officially, we continue with the next session that is related to protecting privacy in the artificial intelligence-driven world, and it is a topic that is directly also linked with our issues, especially for the fans of the movie Terminator from the 80s, but maybe it's dated for the young generation.
Може ли само кратко да го почекаме директорот на Фондот за иновации, господин Фестим Халили. Јас не го гледам во салата. Дали е пристигнат директорот на Фондот за иновации? Мила? Не? Бидејќи планирано е да продолжиме со панелот без пауза. Во тој случај ќе почнеме со панелот, иако ќе беше добро да ја слушнеме перспективата на Фондот за иновации. Директорот е потврден, но очигледно доцни на панелот. Како и да е, ги молам присутните да седнат на местата за да може да продолжиме со панелистите. Почитувани присутни, почитувани колеги, новинари, почитувани панелисти, добро дојдовте денеска на вториот панел на оваа меѓународна конференција. Кажа мојот колега Филип, ние сме фокусирани на заштитата на човековите права на интернет и оттаму и овој панел го носи името заштита на приватноста во свет што го движи вештачката интелигенција. Во текот на вчерашниот ден констатиравме дека ни е потребна цврста основа за создавање одржлив и отпорен дигитален екосистем во кој сите граѓани ќе може да ги користат сигурно, ефикасно и етички јавните услуги и интернетот. Ние од Метаморфозис се залагаме да се зголеми квалитетот на живење, се разбира, преку употреба на дигиталните технологии, но во фокус ни е секако заштитата на и унапредувањето на приватноста и интернет слободата на изразување. Сметаме дека користењето, но и придобивките од интернетот и од другите технологии ќе се зголемат доколку корисниците на интернет се чувствуваат безбедни, слободни и доколку се сигурни дека нивните лични податоци нема да бидат злоупотребени. Од денешна перспектива, кога многу се актуализира прашањето на употребата на вештачката интелигенција, се зголемуваат и предизвиците за заштита на личните податоци. Се разбира, за да не дојдат во погрешни раце, како што беше примерот на претходната сесија, што се случил синека непосредно пред во очи на одржување на вториот ден од оваа конференција. Иако целта на вештачката интелигенција, пак од друга страна, е да им помогне на луѓето и на нивните можности за напредок во секоја општествена сфера, сепак не треба да, ќе се согласиме дека не треба да навлегува во нашата приватност, не сме да го наруши достоинството или да ги подкопа нашите слободи како граѓани. Затоа на овој панел ги поканивме со нас да учествуваат говорници, од кои што може да научиме како ние да го развиваме нашето општество во насока на заштита на приватноста во свет што го држи вештачката интелигенција. На панелот денеска со мене прв ќе говори господин Богдан Манолеа, извршен директор на Асоциација за технологија и интернет романија. Потоа онлайн ќе ја вклучиме господја Ела Јакубовска, виш советник за политики од Европската иницијатива за дигитални права или ЕДРИ. По неа ќе биде господја Ана Тоскич-Цветиновиќ, извршна директорка на Партнери за демократски промени Србија. И ако ни се приклучи на панелот, бидејќи е потврден, ќе го вклучиме и директорот Фестим Халили од Фондот за иновации и технолошки развој. Господине Манолеа, во вашата држава, се извинувам, реално не знам дали се слушам се. Во Романија следевме иницијативи за промовирање на усвојувањето на вештачката интелигенција во јавниот сектор. Романската влада ја започна националната стратегија за вештачка интелигенција 2021-2030, која што ја дава рамката за развој и распоредување на технологии за вештачката интелигенција, од она што го читав во различни сектори, односно во секторот здравство. Од друга страна, прочитав дека критичарите тврдеа дека романската влада не се консултирала адекватно со граѓаните, ниту со граѓанскиот сектор при развојот и примената на овие нови технологии, односно вештачката интелигенција. Може ли да споделите повеќе со нас искуство во однос на имплементација на стратегијата, во однос на предизвиците кои што ги имате, за да може би делови примери кои што се случија, тоа е биометрискиот надзор во руралните области, односно што може накратко да научиме од вашето искуство?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'll try to touch 3 points in my presentation. The first one, and sorry to disappoint you, but Romania doesn't have yet a strategy for AI. The process has started, but there are several international studies, including one that actually was published yesterday by Stanford, called Artificial Intelligence Index Report, which claims that we do, one from 2019. So this is a proof that also humans can make mistakes, not only the AI, as we will see later. But this was about the misinformation because an NGO, a professional NGO called Romanian Business Leaders, have drafted what they call the strategy for AI, which they made public. So everyone in the international context were pointed to that as being the official government strategy, which it doesn't exist. So the official plans are to create a strategy, and this is a part of a project that they submitted for EU funding with the Ministry of Digitization and the Technical University in Cluj. And so far, there have been 4 public consultations on that strategy, but without any public enrollment to the discussion. So I would call them closed consultations. So far, we haven't able to see any public draft of the strategy. So with that, my point 1 closes because there is nothing to talk if there isn't a draft strategy in my concerns. The second one, regarding the implementation of AI in public sector. So as far as we know, there are very little implementation. Maybe there are some on the security side or on the law enforcement. There are auctions by the Romanian police who claims that they want to have machine learning algorithms for analyzing video footage, but these are just public auctions and is not implemented yet. In this specific case, because there were raised concerns about privacy and how they how they would tackle that, the ministry claimed that they would do a data protection impact assessment, which would be mandatory before starts, after buying the software. They didn't see a problem in actually doing the auction first. There are, however, some interesting implementation in public hospitals of AI health solutions from the private sector. The most well-known is a solution called Rayscape, which provides radiologists artificial intelligence tool for better decision-making, especially in chest and lung X-ray analysis. But in these cases, they just provide extra information for the doctor to assess together with a real consultation. So they don't take any decision just based on the information from the AI. Now, the third point that I want to touch upon, and this is the most detailed one, because I think there are at least 4 lessons you would learn and we will learn from this, is a new project that the ministry has launched on 4th of March 2023, when the Romanian Prime Minister has presented a new honorary advisor, which is an artificial intelligence system named Ion. So that is like Johan, I think, in your case. The Prime Minister have claimed that this is the first of this type worldwide, which was developed pro bono by, he called, the best Romanian AI researchers. And the main task would be to scan social networks to inform the government in real time of the Romanians' proposal and wishes. Now, the Minister of Digitization, who took charge of this process, explained as this would be the first governmental advisor to use artificial intelligence to capture opinions in society using data publicly available on social networks. Now, this is beautiful. Now, what could go wrong on such projects? We saw in the first month, so this has been launched for 1 month and 4 days, and we already saw 4 major mistakes. And I think it's a good opportunity to learn from other different mistakes, not yours. The first one was actually on the date when it was presented, because there were a lot of what appeared to be scripted questions for the Prime Minister. So he was presented in front of a mirror that would represent the AI. It actually looks very close like the mirror on your right here. So it was just a mirror and with some letters writing there. And they were asked by the media at the end of the talk if actually the AI has answered the question of the minister. And they claimed, yes, of course they did. However, they were forced to retract the information 1 week later because it was a scripted interaction. So this is lesson 1. If a human uses a script, stay in the script. The AI will do that. The second thing appeared 1 day later, when the video of the project used a copyright image of a child with VR set on, so you would not see her eyes, in its promo video without asking permissions from its copyright owner, which was, by the way, a small municipality, who took the opportunity to send an open letter to the ministry saying, you know, we are very much pro-AI and very interested in cooperation, but by the way, you have copied one of our images without giving us proper credit. Of course, 1 day later, Ion, so the artificial intelligence, wrote a message on the ministry website, surprise, admitting the error and presenting excuses, claiming that it is still running. Not the minister, not the project not the project team, just Ion is still learning. So lesson 2, blame the AI for anything that goes wrong, but claim always that it is learning from their mistakes. Now, more questions appear 2 days later, because then people and journalists were starting to asking about questions. What means scan social networks for opinion? What does it actually do? What personal data it collects? Why it is says in its own privacy policies that it collects the username of a social network user and his message. 1 day later, the privacy policy has been drastically changed, saying that we don't collect any personal data, and when doing the scanning, and only the messages that actually tag our account, which was called Ion, in only 3 social networks, being Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, are included in the analysis. But the questions on the privacy side continued. Why wasn't the data protection impact assessment implemented? This would be mandatory in Romania according to GDPR, a law which is in place in the EU for 5 years. Then, if you collect just a message and a timestamp, an identifier, isn't that personal data? You can go back and look for the person. We didn't receive any public answer on that, so I cannot comment. But what we do know is that the Data Protection Authority has started to do an investigation in this case based on the journalist's article. So lesson 3, blame bad understanding by journalists and public when they actually read the privacy policy. The project team cannot be wrong. Next point. In the first week, the minister claimed that Ion has received 500,000 messages from users, so a success. The main subjects, as presented in the press release, were education, improving public health system, including conditions for people with disabilities, including conditions for elderly person, small pensions, the need to improve life conditions. But if you look on the public profile of the prime ministers, there are different questions in the comments. They all asked at that time of this obvious plagiarist case that he was trying to stop injustice. So he wanted to avoid it with some kind of legal tricks. Now, the critical messages that the team admitted that they've been sent to Ion and are presented on the public webpage are very harmless, such as the one diaspora wants to get back home. So, and on a non-related news account from actually just 2 days, a report from 2 journalists presented how a team of bots was created to provide positive messages to the Prime Minister in 3 social networks. So lesson 4, the AI can only confirm the very good things that happened in Romania. In case of doubt, create bots to dilute the bad behavior. Now, I'm telling you all this because I think every story has more than one side. And it's important also when we look at technology to understand these sides. If you look at any public appearance from Romanian official, and especially from the Minister of Digitalization, they will talk about this project as a major success. It had a lot of foreign media coverage. I mean, almost everyone in the world published at least a press release about that. They said that they've got some important personalities from artificial intelligence who appreciated the use of this technology as a world first for increasing the links between citizens and prime ministers. Of course, we don't know who are these personalities. On the other hand, if you look in the general media and the citizens report, this is actually a subject of memes and mockery so far. And I think that for us, the public questions still remain. What actual personal data it collects? For whose purpose? For the political benefit of one person or several persons, or for the public good? Is there a chance that actually the problems of the society can make it to the Prime Minister, or they will be censored somewhere in the middle? We don't know the answer to these questions, but I think this would be relevant also for these ideas. Thanks.
Така е, ви благодарам. Значи истите елементи техники кои што ги поттикнуваат социјо-економските придобивки, како што запишав од вештачката интелигенција, можат и да донесат големи ризици и негативни последици за физичките лица и општеството. Затоа и дискутираме со панелистите и бидејќи ни се придружи директорот Фестим Халили од Фондот за иновации, еве ќе го сменам радоследот иако го најавив, ќе му дадам сега збор, затоа што тој е директор на Фондот за иновации, кој што е иницијатор во нашата држава, заедно со вице-премиерот одговорен за економски прашања, и формира работна група за создавање на националната стратегија за вештачка интелигенција. Меѓутоа, реално не се случува подолг период ништо, освен прва средба на работната група. Па може ли да ни кажете кога да очекуваме интензивирање на овој процес, што точно фондот дава како поддршка на компании за да се развиваат дигитални асистенти во нашето општество, затоа што беше и најавен дигиталниот асистент Ада, нешто што може да го кажете во однос на тоа каде ние како држава стоиме, односно што превземаме за развој и употреба на вештачка интелигенција. Противно тоа, колку се грижиме за заштита на лични податоци, може ќе кажат и од присутните, гледам присутни од Дирекцијата за заштита на лични податоци. Повелете.
Благодарам. Initially, I would like to apologize for being a bit late because of some misunderstanding. Initially, of course, I would like to congratulate you for this panel discussion, for choosing these topics. And I would like also to welcome to our neighboring guests and the guests that are present here and respected us in listening to our views and opinions regarding the topics that you have chosen. Lately, the technology revolutions are emerging and new ways to solve different problems arise. One of the fields that has done tremendous revolutions in this technology is basically artificial intelligence. We, as the Fund for Innovation and Technology Development, we release several calls during the years. And in these calls, of course, we receive applications by the startups, by the companies that work in the field of artificial intelligence or cybersecurity. It is very important that we understand what AI is, because I think that the public should know the definition. Because we receive several times applications that they think that they are working and having solutions in AI, but they are not. AI is based in 4 main patterns, and the father of artificial intelligence, as we know, is Alan Turing, who in his beginnings, in his books, he has written about how we can provide intelligence to the artifacts. But back in that time, it was a fantasy, let's say. Then he proposed that there are 4 main patterns in order that we have a successful implementation of artificial intelligence. The first one is that we create systems that think like humans. We create systems that act like humans. We create systems that think relatively and rationally, and we should create systems that act rationally. So if all these 4 virtues are implemented in the systems, then we have the artificial intelligence information systems. Also, we have the definition that says that if we provide intelligence to the artifacts, then we have the artificial intelligence. It's not only the robots that are part of artificial intelligence, because usually we think about the robots, or as we call them, humanoids. We have today many fields, subfields of AI, like computer vision. But as my previous speaker, the guest from Romania, mentioned that they are working in the conversational AI, they have released a soft bot called Yon. I will announce today, before all the public, that on Monday we are releasing Ada, which, of course, we have given a women name because we try to take also the gender balance. Ada, why we named this softbot Ada? Because the first woman programmer was called Ada, and also we measured it and as a synonym of Vlada, so that's why we mentioned it Ada. This will be the first conversational AI softbot, which will be launched in several web applications of the ministries of the Fund for Innovation and Technology Development, and it will be 24 hours available to provide all the kind of necessary answers, but it will be based basically in these 4 patterns that we just mentioned. It will provide the answers to the clients simultaneously to more than one client about the grants that we offer for the startups, for the companies, for the commercialization of innovative products, or for the accelerators that are interested to be granted by the fund. So this operator, which will be online, it's not that only it replaces people, but it does the work of many operators. It works 24 hours. It can serve to many clients at the same time. And this means that AI is a powerful tool today, is a powerful field, and the companies and the state institutions must invest. But on the other hand, I must mention this, that there are scientists that are afraid of the artificial intelligence. There is a field called self-reference systems that refer to themselves. In case that we reach to a point where these systems can recreate themselves, robots, for example, can recreate or reproduce other robots, and if they are out of the power of the control of the people, then, according to these scientists, it might come to some kind of war between these uncontrolled systems or controlled by some people which have bad intentions to have power over countries or institutions or even the humanity. So Elon Musk, for example, he is somewhere in the middle of these scientists. He, of course, invests in AI, but also he says that AI is a powerful weapon. He says that AI might be even more powerful than the nuclear bombs. And when he says this, I believe that it has something. And that's why we need to create these national strategies that my previous speaker told us. And of course, we are working in the national strategy of artificial intelligence for our country. We have formed expert groups, but we, of course, because this is the first time that we are dealing with this kind of problem, we have asked for assistance by our partners like the World Bank, the UNDP, GIZ, the German foundation, which also supports the ecosystem of businesses in our country, in order that we create the constraints, we create the frameworks, and we can ease the job of the ecosystem of businesses and state institutions in the ways and manners how to use the AI in order that we don't fall into some kind of misuse of the artificial intelligence. Lately, you are all in evidence that we have the ChatGPT, which has done a tremendous revolution in the AI field. You can talk to this powerful tool, ChatGPT, and it can provide to you seminar works. It can provide to you research work. But now they are going a step forward. You can ask for them to draw your pictures or to comment you on some kind of pictures. So this is becoming a frightening issue to which point the AI has become. We have the autonomous vehicles. I was in Israel before several weeks, and they are working in changing the law for the traffic, because in the traffic law it says that when you drive, you must have a driver. But now they have invented autonomous vehicles that will work without a driver. You should just tell to the system the destination, and it will send you to the destination. For us, it may be strange, but there are countries that invest a lot in this kind of systems. And to come to the point of data protection, we are aware also that the cyber attacks nowadays are very common. Now, when we are talking here, in each 11 seconds, there is a cyber attack somewhere in the world. If in 2001, there were 6 cyber attacks or data breaches for 1 hour, now we have 97 data breaches in 1 hour, which tells us as a statistic that that every one of us here can be a victim of these cyber attacks. And what we need to do as a country is to raise the awareness about cyber defense, about not opening the links that are sent by, even by our friends, because they use the accounts of our Facebook friends or Instagram friends to send us links, and you believe this person, you will open this link and all your data will be breached. When we were discussing with the Israeli authorities, they said that now when we are talking, the biggest university in Israel has been attacked by some Iranian hackers, and all our data are breached. And even these countries, which are very well equipped and developed in the cyber attacks, they can be victims. So what is important that we invest in the protection systems, in firewalls, but mostly what we can do is to raise the awareness of the companies, of the even the students, even from the high school students, we should invest and raise the awareness regarding cyber attacks and how to get protected and how our email accounts should be protected, because even email accounts have been breached in tremendous cases. Companies, for example, we had in our country, we had cases where the fund for health was hacked and all the data were breached and were encrypted. And you know that the medical workers were rising in protests here because they couldn't get the salaries, because when you don't have the system, you cannot even pay the salaries to your workers. In Albania, for example, they launched e-Albania, everything electronically in Albania, but they got breached, also hacked by some Iranian hackers, and all the systems fell. And of course, the countries were cutting the diplomatic relations also. So my message is that we should discuss more on these topics. We should invest more in artificial intelligence and in cyber protection, data protection. Government should take it more seriously, these activities, in order that we don't have cases like the fake alarm bombs that many times cut the students from learning at the schools, or the companies from closing their businesses for several times. And we should form a committee which will deal with these issues and send reports to the hierarchy or to the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Ви благодарам. Да, и уште дополнително да го интензивирате процесот за развој на стратегијата за вештачка интелигенција, затоа што еве само можеме кога ќе погледнеме правната рамка, Советот на ЕУ развива акт за вештачка интелигенција, Советот на Европа работи на првата конвенција за вештачка интелигенција, така што и во нашата држава ќе биде неопходно, ако веќе се пушти во употреба асистентот АДА, да имаме и правна основа, односно рамка, за да ги заштитиме другите права кои што можат да бидат загрозени. Сега ќе ја повикам да се вклучи со нас господја Ела Јакубовска, виш советник, како што ја најавив, за политика од Европската иницијатива за дигитални права ЕДРИ. Ела, здраво. Ке те замолам значи да споделите повеќе детали за работата на ЕДРИ против масовниот надзор кој што се случува, а е базиран на вештачка интелигенција, односно да ни кажете нешто повеќе, кои се вашите предизвици, која е улогата и успехот која што ја постигнува ЕДРИ. Едноставно да научиме работи кои што би биле корисни за сите нас од регионот. Повелете.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. And I'm so sorry not to be with you in person. So congratulations on a brilliant conference, and maybe next time I will be able to join you in person. So as you just mentioned, I work for EDRI, European Digital Rights, which is Europe's largest network of digital human rights organizations working to protect people's rights and freedoms, so privacy, data protection, but also really the full spectrum of human rights and how they can be impacted by the use of technology and data. And we have been working on the topic of artificial intelligence for several years. Even the name artificial intelligence, I think it can be useful to pause and reflect on that name being something that is quite hyped up, that suggests something rather glitzy and impressive. And of course, it certainly can be. But also a lot of our work is focused on possibly more mundane uses of technology. And when I say mundane, I mean that in inverted commas, because already we can see really quite simple and rudimentary types of technology being used in ways that have a profound impact on people's lives. And so EDRI's commitment when we're working on this topic is to not just look at the future and the so-called potential of these technologies, but to look at how they already permeate our societies in many ways today, and even in forms that are not so advanced. They're often being used in ways that are very deeply harmful. And so that is really what we want to stop. Our approach is that AI, which poses a risk to people's rights, needs to be regulated. That doesn't mean it can't go ahead, but it needs to be transparent. It needs to have human rights impact assessments and many other measures to make sure that people aren't being harmed. But also when the risk is unacceptable, we do think that those use cases need to be banned. And so one of the things I've been working on for several years is a campaign called Reclaim Your Face, where we fight to ban public facial recognition and other uses of similar systems that treat people as walking barcodes. But I also work kind of in tandem with colleagues much more broadly. And when I said that there are often much less technologically advanced forms of AI that we see that are already having a huge impact on people's lives, one of the really good examples of that is the Dutch benefits scandal. You might have come across it in the last few years. It's sometimes called SIRI, or system risk. And this was technically an AI system, but a much more simple version of an AI system than what we see when we see pictures of smart robots and all sorts of futuristic technology. This was a bit more like a spreadsheet, but it was the same technology, and it was used to supposedly predict which people were cheating on their benefits, committing benefits fraud. And it was completely inaccurate. It was using things like where people live, even proxies for their race, their ethnicity, to profile them and accuse them of benefits fraud completely unfairly. And as a result, thousands of people's lives were ruined. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that there were people who lost their jobs, people who had their children taken away from them, people who died by suicide because of the consequences of falsely being accused of benefit fraud and having the benefits money that they really relied on taken away from them. So, we really have to think critically about the use of AI, about where it is acceptable to use AI and where it isn't. And also to be aware of how something that EDRI tracks is how austerity measures often drive this resort to different technologies, including AI. We do see governments across Europe and beyond looking to spend less money on welfare, on healthcare, and so forth, which can be very problematic if we are depriving people of kind of proper patient care, proper access to human experts, and instead trying to have AI technologies mediate everything that we do. And so maybe jumping a little bit more into detail on the biometrics facial recognition work, which is what I have focused specifically on. I mentioned the Reclaim Your Face campaign, which is a movement that started around 3 years ago and is now made up of over 80 civil society organizations. And we have almost 100,000 supporters from across EU countries and also from Serbia. And through this campaign, this movement, people have taken to the streets in the last few years, made art, documentaries, worked with politicians, all sorts of actions centered around our core demand, which is that we want governments to ban all biometric mass surveillance. So I mentioned facial recognition. This is kind of the most commonly known type of biometric mass surveillance on which we work. But our central premise is that whether it's because our faces are being used to track us across time and place, to permanently identify us, or whether other characteristics are being used about our faces and bodies, maybe to profile the way that we walk, the way that we sit on a chair, the way that we smell. These might sound a bit ridiculous, but these are all real examples that we've come across of how people's bodies are being used to identify them permanently. And that's something that we really, really object to. We don't think it has a place in a democratic society, whether it's the police doing this to us or other authorities or even private companies. We don't want to be deprived of our anonymity forever. We don't want to be profiled based on our gender, our skin color, or other assumptions about us that a discriminatory machine is making. And our work on this, of course, centers on rights to privacy and data protection, because when you're being constantly identified and profiled, those rights are really at the core. But also we see those as gateway rights to really the full range of our other human rights. If you are being tracked and profiled at all times, how are you supposed to go to a protest? How are you supposed to be comfortable going to the doctor to access healthcare or going to a lawyer? And our campaign, our work is not abstract or hypothetical on this topic. It's actually in reaction to real examples that we've seen in the past 5 or so years springing up across Europe and across the world. We have seen people being surveilled using facial recognition and other biometric surveillance systems when they're going to the doctors, to places of worship, or to LGBT bars. We've seen homeless people being targeted and accused of loitering by these systems. And we've seen people at the EU's borders seeking to migrate or seeking asylum being used as test subjects for these systems. And whilst the premise that we often hear for having facial recognition and other similar surveillance in public spaces is that we need it to be safe, something that we really try and raise awareness of is that there's really no evidence that we are safer when we're subjected to these systems. And actually, there's quite a lot of evidence that much less intrusive measures can be a lot more effective. Just one example is having better street lighting. That's something that a lot of research says can make people safer in public spaces. And yet what we see is a lot of governments resorting to these really intrusive and opaque systems and often deploying them without any public transparency. So maybe just to finish off about where we are at now, we're working really closely on the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act draft, which is a new law that is currently being negotiated. And we've been really successful in setting the agenda at EU level, because from the very beginning, this law has proposed to ban some forms of what we would call biometric mass surveillance. So it's proposed that when it's done live and as you're walking around a public space, it should be impossible for companies or authorities to surveil you using your face or your body. And we want to expand that because it's a fairly limited ban that was put forward. And now in the European Parliament, we're seeing lawmakers actually being really keen to prohibit these most harmful use cases because they recognize that it treats each of us as suspects. It's not just looking for one particular person of interest. It's wanting to surveil all of us and really having a transformative impact on whether or not we can enjoy our public spaces freely in the way that we're supposed to be able to in a democratic society. And as well as the European Parliament, we have seen progress in quite a few other countries, and that will be kind of my closing reflection, that there are many positive examples of governments taking this seriously and taking steps to protect us. Italy introduced a temporary ban on these technologies. There's a new campaign in Belgium calling to ban them. And outside the EU, but very close by, we've even seen in Serbia a new law that was supposed to legalize some of these practices being withdrawn, and a commitment made to try and come up with a new version of the law that would respect data protection and fundamental rights. But at the same time, we also have a lot of reasons to tell us that we need to continue in this fight and to fight for our rights. France just last week passed a law that would legalize some of these practices, becoming the first European country to explicitly do so, and setting not only a really bad precedent, but also going in the opposite direction to where we see the EU as a whole going. So it really does show that we need to continue to raise awareness of these most harmful examples and just why we need to reject them, as well as then going back to my points at the very beginning, making sure that when there are uses of AI that we think are permissible in a democratic society, that we have the right safeguards, that we can hold our governments or companies to account to make sure that they aren't doing things that are going to harm us, and that ultimately we only use AI systems that are going to help the public good and that are in our interests above all else. Thank you.
И благодарам на Ела. Можам да сумирам дека вештачката интелигенција, доколку се користи погрешно, како што таа истакна, отвара голема грижа за сите нас кои што се грижиме за дигиталните и човековите права. Во суштина запишав дека системите за вештачка интелигенција имаат способност да го влошат надзорот во суштина врз граѓаните, односно упаѓаат во нашите лични животи. И оттаму последна на панелот ќе поканам да зборува господја Ана Тоскиш-Цветиновик, извршна директорка на Партнери за демократски промени Србија, партнери на проектот. Тие имаат во регионов стратегија за вештачка интелигенција, но бидејќи додека соработувавме на имплементација на проектот, на ИДО, односно идентификува биометриски надзор во Србија, ќе ја замолам да сподели дел од нивното искуство, кои се предизвиците за заштита на личните податоци. Повелете.
Thank you, Andrew, for the introduction, and thanks for the invitation. Ella mentioned Serbia a couple of times, so it's not a wonder why she did so. Serbia has been playground for different AI initiatives and projects for several years now, and it goes both for the regulatory initiatives, but both for those that are taking place in practice. On the regulatory side, Serbia is the first country in the Western Balkans that did adopt AI strategy in the end of 2019. And the action plan also followed the strategy, and these documents are basically setting the strategic framework on the development of the artificial intelligence in the country, pleading for more education on the issue, responsible deployment of the AI by the development, but also by those subjects who are using it. And also it mentions human rights and specifically data protection, and was one of the core values. Just a couple of weeks ago, the government adopted another document based on the AI strategy, and these are the ethical guidelines for responsible deployment of artificial intelligence. Talking about these processes, we mentioned how the participation of the society as a whole, civil society, academia, and citizens is crucial if we want to really talk about responsible and the use of AI that can benefit the whole society. With the adoption of the AI strategy in Serbia, we didn't have that. Civil society, but also academia and any parts of society that does not fit within the business or engineer field was not included in the development of this strategy. For the ethical guidelines, we participated in public discussions, trying to put more focus on transparency, especially when the AI is used by public institutions, and also trying to put more focus on human rights approach. However, our comments were not addressed in the final version of this document. It is, on the other side, good that we are having this framework. We're talking about the soft law. We can discuss a little bit later, if we have a couple of more minutes, whether we actually need a strict regulation of AI and whether the regulation of AI can actually solve the issues that are arising from the development and use of artificial intelligence. Parallel to these regulatory initiatives, we had several other practical examples of how our government, most of all, is initiating the use of AI without actually respecting all the principles that are envisaged in the strategic framework, but also in the personal data protection law that Serbia adopted, and it is aligned with the GDPR to most extent. We mentioned biometric surveillance. This is actually the part of a broader bilateral cooperation with China, and specifically Chinese company Huawei, with which Serbia signed the agreement, purchased equipment, and since 2019 there were some speculations that the biometric surveillance in the streets of Serbian capital Belgrade is actually taking place. Since then, civil society, international community were actually trying to find out whether this is actually taking place, and trying to request from the government and the Ministry of Interior actually to provide with the data protection impact assessment, and also to work on developing legal framework if they want to use this kind of system. And as Ella mentioned, for 2 times in 16 months, from first time in September 2021 and second time now in December 2022, the draft laws on police that were actually providing provisions that would enable the use of mass biometric surveillance were withdrawn from the procedure after the reaction from the civil society and also activists, academia as well, because comments were related to the fact that this was excessive. That this use that was proposed by these provisions was not proportional with the goal that was supposed to be achieved, and that is prevention and combating of crime. Also, we are tracking what is going on at the level of EU in terms of AI Act, and for us it will be an important message if the actual ban is taking place in the EU, since Serbia is supposed to align its regulations with the EU laws. As again Ella mentioned, now we're in the process of another consultation round with the ministry, and we get these promises that if these provisions are going to be in the next law, they will be aligned with the, first of all, data protection law, but also Serbia's other commitments that are provided in, by our membership in Council of Europe, most of all, and also EU integration process. So now we are waiting for the new data protection impact assessment. However, while we were struggling against the biometric surveillance, there was another piece of legislation that was actually adopted in Serbia, and its implementation started in March last year, and it's the law on social card. The example of Netherlands was mentioned, and I think that was one of the role models for the Serbian system as well. This law was supposed to prevent frauds in the social welfare system. It introduces the use of algorithm that processes more than 130 different types of data of an individual, but not only on the applicant for the social welfare beneficiary benefits, but also of the people related to this person, members of their families, former partners, both like former spouses, but also former informal partners. And again, this was the piece of legislation that was adopted even with independent authorities, including the Data Protection Authority, commenting that the data processing with this law is excessive and it's not proportionate. In the first 6 months of its implementation, more than 20,000 people were actually excluded from the social welfare system. For almost a year now, civil society organizations, especially the ones who are working in the field of social economic rights, are trying to get more information from the government on how the system actually works. They didn't get the information on the logic of the algorithm. In one of the responses they got from the relevant ministry, it was even stated that the algorithm is not even used, even though the law states it does. And the first response stated that the algorithm is actually being used. It was also stated that this was not actually the system that makes automated decisions about the individual's rights. It rather provides notifications on any changes that happen within the economical status of the person. However, people working in the social welfare system do not have the possibility to object this decision or notification whatsoever. So practically the decision is being made on an automatic basis. So I know we have a pretty limited time. I just want to conclude, like, these are just the examples of how, as we discussed this for several times, if you're talking about the use of AI, especially in the public sphere and by public authorities, unfortunately, they are being tested on the most vulnerable groups. And the case of Serbia and Holland proves that. It also proves that privacy breaches are usually not taking place as a sole violation of this right. They are even preceding or are being consequential violation of other rights, being it protection against discrimination, being it freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, etc., etc. And we can discuss that, algorithms are biased, the algorithms are being discriminatory, etc., etc. But this is actually taking place in societies that are discriminatory. So it's not that the algorithms are biased. It's the people who create them, and decisions that are being imposed in these algorithms are actually biased and discriminatory. And unless we solve these social issues on the ground, like, there's no artificial intelligence system that will help solve them. So that's it. I'm open for discussion and questions. Thank you.
Ви благодарам, Ана, бидејќи сме веќе при крај со времето дозволено за овој панел, а предпоставувам дека темата е интересна и ќе предизвика дискусија, ќе може тоа да го направиме на кафе паузата за да не ве лишиме од пауза. Јас ќе заклучам од она што го каже Јана, дека системите за вештачка интелигенција треба да бидат безбедни, да ги почитуваат основните правила, етички правила, постоечките закони за основните наши права, бидејќи кажав и на почетокот, нашиот живот, односно квалитетот на живење се подобрува преку употреба на дигиталните технологии, но во фокус мора да ни биде заштитата на човековите права. Ви благодарам за интересот, повелете на кафе пауза, во 12:30 е следниот панел.
Mislim дека може да почне. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us in this important panel session on how to build cyber resilient communities. I'm Bardil Yashari. I will be the moderator of this session, and with me we have a distinguished group of experts from the region and from this field of expertise that will share with us their experience and the activities that they are implementing in regard to cybersecurity and what is needed in order to build a cyber resilience community. As we have already heard from yesterday, but also from the presentation today, we know that the digital transformation is something that is inevitable. It is happening. It is not something that is optional and we can choose to be part or not. But of course, we have also heard a lot of challenges related to this digital transformation, and cybersecurity was highlighted as one of the main challenges. And with this dynamic development of technology, it is becoming even more challenging, and somehow we need that everyone involved, every sector of the society, contribute in order to have a cyber resilient society. What it means to be cyber resilient? Basically, the most basic, let's say, it's not a definition, but basic perception about resilience is to anticipate cyber attacks, to know how to deal with them, and also to recover from them, and also to continue and work with all sectors of the society so that they don't happen in the future. Of course, in this, let's say, effort to build cyber resilient communities, each actor within the society have a role to play. We as an NGO sector, the academia, the business sector, the government, but also the media and other people that are using digital tools, meaning everyone, because our society will be resilient when each of us have the necessary skills and the necessary tools to navigate safely and not to be compromised, their personal data not to be compromised, their integrity is not attacked, or also their freedom of expression is not compromised, etc., etc. So it's a complex discussion. It's a very challenging environment in which we are operating. But what is more important for us as an NGO, and we as Metamorphosis Foundation, we always somehow put this in the forefront, is that we want a society where there is a balance between security, cybersecurity, and human rights. And this is actually the topic that we will discuss today, and to see with our panelists here what each of us can do in order to be efficient in building a cyber resilience community. We have here with us Anna Bavcic. She's a project coordinator of the Geneva Center for Security and Governance from Switzerland. She's working in the region, mapping cybersecurity, human rights related issues. She will share with us the recommendation of their work. And for us, it's important because we also cooperate with DCAF, and it was very interesting to see, and for us very, let's say, positive that Anna Bavcic is also most and foremost a human rights activist, and bringing this human rights perspective into cybersecurity is very much necessary. So please, Anna, share the recommendations from your work and activities in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Badr. I hope you can see me and hear me.
Yes.
So yes, thank you. And I want to say that I'm very sorry that I am not able to participate in person, but due to private reasons, I couldn't travel. But I'm happy to share some of our insights. And as Badr mentioned, DCAF is an organization that already for 10 years is working on increasing cybersecurity capacities of cybersecurity sector in the governments, but also as of recently we have started incorporating human rights into this work and exploring venues on how human rights can be actually a part of this discussion. But let me first reflect a bit on our experience and maybe challenges that we have encountered in our work with the governments and with state representatives. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you.
Yes, please continue.
Yes. So I guess one of the maybe most important to mention challenge is a general lack of absorption capacity by the governments in the Western Balkans. We have often seen, and now especially increasingly, we see a lot of initiatives to increase and to kind of push governments to work on cybersecurity documents, improve cybersecurity responses, and this is mainly done to capacity building. But what we need to really bear in mind that a lot of these institutions lack in resources and in time. I would say that there are not enough people to actually work on cybersecurity in the government. So even when we have people most willing to cooperate, it's really difficult to get their time and actually do something. So, for example, in our experience, there are a lot of mid-level managers that are very competent and willing to move things forward. But besides this, time, there is also not much political will as such to actually move these things forward. And I would say there's not enough political leadership in the sector, even though cybersecurity governance is not really highly political thing, but having in mind that all the government institutions are led by politicians in some way, this kind of political will translates to the fact that there's no enough resources in these institutions that are in charge of cybersecurity governance. So, in most of the countries, there is no minister who is specifically responsible for cybersecurity governance. And even though most of the countries have strategies, they're not necessarily implemented. And this is due to the lack of prioritizing cybersecurity. These recent attacks have changed a bit the situation, and we see governments more and more involved and more interested in increasing their capacities. So, for example, in Montenegro, they are drafting a law on cybersecurity, which will be in line with NIS2 directive, and this will be the first and only law in Europe so at this point to be in line with the NIS2 directive, which is a great advancement. But the question is whether this would have happened if there was no political will. And connected to this lack of absorption capacity is also a lack of budget, which is not a new thing for cybersecurity sector, especially when we compare it to the private sector. So, the government sector will never be competitive in the same level as the public sector, and the governments will never be able to attract experts in the same way that a private sector can through salaries. But there are examples of countries that make it work and that are creating creative strategies to keep people, either for patriotic reasons or public sector benefits or work-life balance that private sector cannot offer, or even like encouraging women to get more involved. But this is something that still lacks in the Western Balkans. And that being said, Western Balkans countries are quite behind in training new people and getting them involved in the cybersecurity governance. And finally, I would say one of the challenges that we are facing in the work and related to this absorption capacity and the fact that there is not enough people actually working on the area is that in many countries there are really heavy bureaucratic obstacles in hiring people. So it's not necessarily that there is corruption, but there are different procedures and different systematizations that need to be overcome. So it's very difficult to get the right people in the right places, and often, cybersecurity is not seen seriously enough. And this heavy bureaucracy is really not living up to, cybersecurity that is changing on a day-to-day basis. I would say that these are some of the general challenges that we have seen. But I would also like to reflect shortly on the human rights aspect of cybersecurity. And this is something that we did together also with Metamorphosis in North Macedonia and other organizations in the region last year, to comprehensive mapping of how human rights can be incorporated in cybersecurity, or better to say, what are the violations that happen in this domain and that reflect human rights. And I would say that this is, I would even say that this is a pioneering publication, because there are not many publications like this globally. And what we have seen in the Western Balkans, and this is, I must say that it's not only the case in the Western Balkans, it's the case everywhere, is that when we start looking at cybersecurity, we see that there is a really state corporate-centric understanding of this sector. So in general, it's very difficult to see civil society or independent institutions and other stakeholders included in working groups or development of political documents and legal regulation. And this is the case as well in the Western Balkans. So, for example, in Serbia, there's a Petnica group and Neretva group in Bosnia, which is a multi-stakeholder group working on cybersecurity. And beyond, I mean, there are state actors, there are non-state actors, but from the private sector. So there is no civil society involved, and there are no independent institutions, or I would say there is no a stakeholder that would talk about human rights in these groups. And this reflects to the fact that, there is a regulation gap in the level of relation between cybersecurity governance and human rights. So strategic documents on cybersecurity don't include human rights, and vice versa. Strategic documents on human rights are not reflecting online threats. So there needs to be, there needs to be leadership in this way, especially because we have seen examples of a regulation, I would say, going in a wrong direction, and the examples of trying to tackle disinformation, arbitrary procedures, and some even detentions that were not following the right rule of law procedures. So there needs to be leadership, and I see civil society leading this conversation. And I would also mention that recent attacks, but also even attacks before this, have kind of pointed out to the lack of transparency and accountability when it comes to big attacks to critical infrastructure in countries that you're working in. So the governments don't really engage in or don't really have capacity for crisis communication, and then citizens in return don't have a real understanding of what has been playing out, how can this affect them, how these certain breaches affect their rights, which causes more distrust and panic. It could cause panic among citizens. So there's also a huge need for governments to understand the responsibility of communicating these attacks in a timely manner, and communicated of course, not everything, but parts of the facts that are relevant for citizens. And finally, I would say, and I think this is a very important point, and maybe Andre will also reflect a bit more on this, the state lack responsibility for individual kind of cybersecurity, and this relates to the whole talk about human rights in cybersecurity. So, and they even occasionally engage in violations of this domain. So we've seen that the state doesn't really address cases of targeting human rights offenders through smear campaigns, threats, and videos attacks on their social media or in relation to their work. But we have also seen states such as Serbia trying to push AI technologies in surveillance, and this has been linked to the right to enjoyment of freedom of peaceful assembly. So there needs to be accountability also in this domain, and state needs to understand that they're not only in charge of protecting infrastructure, but they also have a negative obligation not to interfere in others' rights. So I would stop there. I hope I didn't take too much of time, and then we can extend a bit more.
Thank you very much, Anna, for sharing your general recommendations related to cybersecurity and highlighting the lack of resources and capacities within institutions here in the Western Balkans, but also for for bringing in the human rights perspective into the cybersecurity dialogue. And I think that only if we work together, as you mentioned, as a multi-stakeholder group, I think that we can be more efficient in building a cyber resilient community. And this is also proven by your work. And this approach should be something that we should all follow. Let's continue now with Andrei Petrovsky from Share Foundation. Andrei has extensive experience in cybersecurity and digital technology related issues. He is very knowledgeable about the context here in the Western Balkan. He and Share Foundation are working a lot in the region and in Serbia. So Andrei, please, can you tell us what should we do in order to build a cyber resilient community or a cyber resilient society in the region?
Hvala ti, Bardil, na javata. Žal mi je, što ne možem da vidim v Skopju sa site vas. Pozdravi se, nadam kako se vidime v nekoja naredna prilika. Now I will switch to English just to make it easier for everyone to follow and not to overburden the interpretation team. So yeah, the Share Foundation has been working for over 10 years in Serbia and the region in various capacities when it comes to cybersecurity, working with both state actors and non-state actors, taking part in many multi-stakeholder groups in terms of policy development and consultation, etc. But we also have vast experience in working with people on the ground. So we have been building cybersecurity capacities for tens, maybe even hundreds of NGOs in Serbia and the region, through education, in some cases even through procurement of equipment, etc. So we have tackled the topic from multiple sides. What we see as a systemic problem when it comes to the side of the state or the side of the system is the fact that I know that the government likes to say that they don't have any money to invest in cybersecurity, but the issue comes when they have tenders or public procurement processes for software or technology of any sort that their affiliates, friends, relatives basically win, and then the quality of the product that's been delivered within the tender is not as it should be. We have had a few cases in Serbia, and we've had cases also in Albania and Montenegro in a similar capacity, where big state companies have procured software that was well, basically developed by affiliates through a, well, basically corrupt deal that have led to major leaks of personal data of citizens. Investigative journalists have been dealing with these stories, even though it's very hard to to shed light on these cases because of the, well, basically lack of judicial freedom in most of these countries. So I would say, if you ask me, the biggest problem in cybersecurity, as with anything in our society, is the lack of rule of law and corruption as such. So if we did not, if the government did not spend so much money in buying not good enough software, then the number of incidents would be definitely lower, or the scale of the incidents would be definitely lower. We had a case, I'll just be speaking about the Serbian cases because I've been dealing with them most, where the Republic, the public land registry, Republički geodetski zavod, was under ransomware attacks, and it couldn't operate for a few weeks, meaning that no transaction in procurement, inheritance, bank loans that would be in any way related to the land or property could not be executed, which is a strong paralysis of the system as such. And then we also had the Agency for Privatization in Serbia a few weeks ago leaking the personal data of 6 million people. So it is, we have had these cases of what we like to call clumsy digitalization. We have reported on the cases, we have investigated the cases to a great extent as a group of experts, but what has lacked in any of these cases is accountability from the side of the prosecution or the judiciary. So we haven't had anyone who has been processed for these, let's say, neglects in the most soft way, even though it could be considered abuse of power in some cases. So that is one side of the problem. The other side of the well, let's say, issue is the lack of capacity on the side of civil society to get involved in digital issues. The donor community until recently had, well, basically no interest in investing in technology for civil society, and we have struggled a lot in supplying some of these most vulnerable organizations with basic equipment that would serve their purposes, to either help them switch to open source solutions, or help them buy licenses for operating systems if they couldn't switch to Linux, for example. We have had great help from TechSoup on that regard, which is a network of well, basically companies that offer free or discounted prices for licenses for NGOs in the region, and I think most countries in the region are members of TechSoup, and the NGOs from these countries are eligible for these programs, where they get I don't know, $10 for 20 licenses of antivirus software, or Windows licenses also like $10, something like that. So it's helped tremendously to work with these organizations, to have such a partner. But and I think that we have managed to first raise the awareness and then build some capacities on the side of the NGO. The third component of our work involves well, general awareness raising. Traditionally, for a few years now, we have had quite interesting campaigns for October as the month of cybersecurity. We have had public awareness campaigns on our social media. Last year, we did a regional campaign in which 15 organizations from the region shared the campaign through their network. It's a like 2-week campaign with some, I don't know, 10 to 15 different types of content that would involve quick tips and tricks, but also concerns that what people should take care about. We have produced a cybersecurity toolkit, which is multi-language. I think that at this point it involves all the languages from the Western Balkans countries plus English. So it is available for everyone to use. It's like a troubleshooter tool where you go through a few steps to be able to identify the type of incident that you're facing and what could be the possible solutions. It's at toolkit.sharecert.rs. I'll be happy to share it with the organizers, then they can distribute it to everyone. And finally, what has been most, let's say, a biggest focus for us in that sphere, other than what Anna mentioned regarding the biometric surveillance in Belgrade, that is a topic related to surveillance, so I won't go too much into it. It is an effort that lasts for 4 years now, that we're combating the introduction of biometric surveillance in Serbia. We have been working along with other NGOs to prevent the government from adopting a law on internal affairs that would basically allow for the police to have a possibility to record faces of the citizens of Belgrade with through 8,000 devices that are distributed around the city. But finally, what is most important for us in the sphere of cybersecurity, and it is a more, let's say, human rights related topic, is the well, basically what you could traditionally call revenge porn, but it is basically the illicit capture or distribution of private videos. We have built a toolkit that is currently working in Serbia and Croatia only, but we're working on making it more regional, with allowing victims of this type of, so if your private videos have been leaked by your partner or anyone else to the public or to a private group on Telegram, we've had cases in the region with this as well, to help the victims how to submit a legal claim to the system or seek other types of help to remove the content and to well, basically get some support. So our work is quite diverse. On one side, we do work with the state, unfortunately, usually criticizing it, but we are also constructive part of the group of special computer emergency response teams, which is run by a state agency. We are also part of the Petnica group on cybersecurity. So we do have a constructive role, but unfortunately, due to the incidents that we are facing, more often than not, we have to be very critical towards the government and other state institutions. But on the other side, we are trying to empower the public and especially human rights defenders, which is not easy always, but I think that we're doing our best. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrei, for sharing your experience. And as we say that cybersecurity starts at personal level, it was also interesting to hear that for government institutions, it starts also when they do procurement, so that they will be, they should be very careful when procuring software and hardware, so that the threats are not on this level. It's also important that you as an NGO, you are really having a holistic approach. You are raising awareness, you are educating, and you are also advocating. But at the same time, you are having this constructive role. You monitor the government and provide recommendation. And I see that, and I think that NGOs are somehow the best place to really do this. And we will continue to do so, and together. Thank you very much. But now let's hear what the academia has to say. We have here Professor Adrian Besimi, who is the Prorector for Academic Planning and Digitalization at the Southeast European University in Tetovo. Adrian has been very active in cybersecurity issues, and I will be very happy to hear how they see the role of his university, but also the academia in contributing to building a cyber-resilient society. Please, Adrian.
I will continue in English if that's possible, because of the translation issues and synchronization. As Bardil mentioned, I represent Southeast European University. I'm the Prorector for Academic Planning and Digitalization. So this keyword digitalization was introduced 4.5 years ago. The idea was that we must also take care of digitalization as a specific task within the higher management of the university. So digitalization, I'm also from computer science. It's part of my job, but in a way in relation to the planning of the future academic programs. Now, before moving to what we do, I will do some
background information on what Europe is supposedly planning for the future of Europe. It's called European Digital Agenda 2030, which was released a few years back. And in that digital agenda, there is a special part that emphasizes the level of digital skills of the overall European. And in their report, it says that currently there is 47% skills acquired by the community in Europe, which is pretty low according to them. And their plan is by 2030, this level of knowledge of digital skills to be about 80%. So it's not just Western Balkans, it's all over the place. There are missing skills, there are wrong skills that are acquired. And this is also the case with Western Balkans. In addition to that, there is a special program called Digital Europe Program, DEP, that is including digitalization as key concept, and they are working with a budget of $1.3 billion for a period of 7 to 10 years. And in this amount of money, which should help European countries and associated countries like Western Balkan countries to increase their digital skills services towards the community and awareness. In this part, there is a special section for cybersecurity. So European Union and European Commission is taking seriously this, and they invest a lot of money and programs, and they built a special strategy for cybersecurity. They call it cybersecurity on internet, safety on internet, and this is in a way also affecting us. One of the projects, for instance, this project is funded through that type of strategy. So the idea is to raising the awareness of the general population and the society where we live. In addition to this, there is another fact that I want to mention. Cybersecurity now it's becoming a business, a relatively good business, and it is anticipated that within the next few years, the services, global services in the world, software services mainly, and other products, will reach about 15% of all digital products. So it's also a business. There is also a huge opportunity in this. Now let's go to our case. I will not talk much about Western Balkans, but just general information. We work in a society that inherited the education system. So we still have ex cathedra lecturing. We don't want innovation in the programs. I'm not talking about digital innovations. And what happens is that there is a huge resistance by units, let's say faculties, staff, that don't want to change something. And this is happening all over the Europe, but mainly Western Balkans. We are known for that. Specifically based on the part of digital skills and digital courses related to IT skills. It is sad to say that I have analyzed many of the curricula existing in North Macedonia. This is what I would like to discuss. Most of them do not cover IT skills as course in their studies. Majority of them do not even have an IT related course during the whole cycle of studies. And predominantly, this is the case with law degrees, specifically, medical degrees, and architecture. Unfortunately, I don't know why they don't like it. It's got some sort of hesitation. And if this is happening all years back, actually, I don't want to talk about cybersecurity as part of that. So it's not even there. In terms of professional cybersecurity degrees or studies, there is only one that I'm familiar with in University of Goce Delchev in Štip. I don't know how many students they have. And one recently announced by Finki in Skopje. We just talked about that earlier with one of the professors, Chorbev, that couldn't enroll enough students from North Macedonia. So sad, it's really sad, but these are the professional degrees that the universities are doing. Overall, the universities are not doing enough. That's my whole point. Sometimes it's hesitation, sometimes it's because of their right to decide on what is best for the students, and the right is decided in the faculty council. So they decide this is how we're going to proceed. Even though there are recommendations from EU, what is needed, soft skills are needed, languages are needed, communication skills are needed, verbal and oral communication skills, digital skills are needed, cybersecurity basic skills are needed. So these are needed for all students, not IT students. So IT students are separate. And faculties decide on this, and most of the universities, the state-owned universities, are actually working in a decentralized way. So they have units like faculties who can do whatever they want. Instead of smaller universities like Southeast European University, we are integrated. So we have a central place where we started the process. So for us, it's much easier to implement some strategy. For major universities like UKIM and others, it's really hard because every unit, they can do their own decision. In terms of what can be done, except for the projects where we get the funding and we can do these promotions, there are other activities like you do with raising awareness, webinars and seminars and so on. The university, actually, our university, started really early with IT-related skills as a mandatory course for all degrees since 2001. Back in the time, it was too early, but now I think the knowledge, the skills that students get is somehow saturated because they come from elementary school and high school and they already have that knowledge. So what you can offer extra, that's the question that we can discuss today. But it's important they should get that knowledge. We have also had several projects similar to your project. One with our center, we call it ICANN Center. We had 4 trainings in cybersecurity, a little bit more advanced, and we concluded with a hackathon in cybersecurity. And this is only the recent 5 years. Okay. Before that, it was really close to 0, I would say. We have also courses in cryptography and network security in computer science degrees. Since 2021, I think Share Foundation is our partner with CRDF Global. We started a campaign to train all students, non-IT students, with cyber education course, which is a free course offered by CRDF Global. And we promoted the course. More than 300 students for the first year, they took the course. It's really good course. It's in all languages, like more than 20 languages there. It's a Albanian version, Macedonian version, all the versions of the Balkans, even Russian, Ukrainian, and so on. And we continue now this course to be part of the curricula, and we deliver that through the IT skills course. So this way, we want to make sure the non-IT students get the basic knowledge. So this is really basic course. We have also worked with Metamorphosis, actually, cybersecurity webinars that were organized. I was also the trainer there. Also, the university was an organizer and host of another event, the government cybersecurity challenges, where the accent was on the government IT sector. So this was more, let's say, a little bit more advanced than general courses. And the training was intended for that audience, specific audience, during the week of the attack in the fund for health in Macedonia. And then there was a lot of discussion, could that be prevented or not? There were experts from the industry who took care, and there were like 40 participants in the event. This week, we also start with another campaign similar to the one that I see on the video over there on the display. So raising awareness through minor but really important small things that community should know. So all the community, like sharing passwords, complicated passwords, Wi-Fi access, buying online. So small things that everybody needs to know, not complicated, easy to use campaign. And we just started yesterday, actually, and we'll continue for the next month. Also, we have a strong collaboration with AEC, with CIRT, with Macadu CIRT. We try to help. We are part of their ecosystem, and whenever it's needed, they invite us. But this is happening really rarely, comparing to what their needs are. I understand their capacities are low, but we are there to help if we can help somehow. And also, we do some advocacy in terms of strategies and policies with Ministry of Information Society and Administration. Until now, they hear us. I don't know how many of these ideas will be turned into strategies and action plans. Students also have their own activities. They have a working group called Cybersecurity Group, and they do similar activities to raise awareness and beyond that. But the more advanced ones are intended for advanced users. We are talking about raising the awareness of the community as a whole, and similar activities to what society, like civil society, like Metamorphosis is doing, or Share Foundation, is what we also do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian, for sharing your insights. And emphasizing once again how important it is to raise awareness, to educate, to train, and also it was interesting for me to hear that there are those activities trying to include cybersecurity in the curricula for non-IT students, and I think this is a very important step. We also heard that there are a lot of opportunities for fundings from the European Union that can be used by the academia, by the NGO sector, but also by the private sector. So it's up to us to work together, to use the opportunities and to tackle the challenges that we are all facing. Thank you very much for all the panelists. Now I will open the floor for questions, remark, or suggestion from the audience.
Question for the sorry, are the other participants which were online available now for answering? Yes. Okay, so I will ask Mr. Petrovsky firstly, how does he think that the politics influences the cybersecurity? Considering the fact that, especially about Serbia, because Serbia is very close with Russia still, and how can that endanger the cyber security in the region? And the second question is about Professor Bassimi. It's good that those things which you teach them at the universities are excellent, but because they're excellent and because they're by the Western standards, I think they're not really good for the students, because afterwards they come into a pretty Balkanian surrounding, which those standards do not exist. And so do you think that maybe they should be more aware, so that not all of our students will go abroad, to live forever, to live this region forever, which is, I know it is the case with the students from the southeastern universities, because their diplomas are by the Bologna Convention, and they can immediately find a job abroad. And I think that this is also the case with those which have diplomas from let's say the big universities like Sorbonne, for example, because sometimes they even finish by intervention from our administration, because Western Europeans are kind of xenophobians, and they don't want those students to stay in France or in I don't know, in Holland, and they phone the professors. I saw with my own eyes, and they tell them to give them diplomas, and that they will employ them later here, and they won't stay. So what kind of knowledge is this? This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first question was for Mr. Petrovsky. Andre, did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. Well, I would not comment on the geopolitical aspect of your question relating the closeness of Serbia to Russia. There are many opinions on that. Not everyone in Serbia is close to Russia, so it is a big country, On the other side, when it comes to what the state can do, I mean, why is corruption basically the biggest problem? If not the biggest, one of the bigger problems when it comes to cybersecurity. I'll just share an example with you. So the husband of the former minister of the judiciary, and the brother of the former minister and the current minister of, so the same person is the husband of one minister and the brother of another. I won't go into the specifics. His company at the beginning of the pandemic got tens of millions of euros for maintenance and upgrade of information system in the healthcare sector. Few months after that tender was executed, the same system leaked the credentials, so the username and the password for the database for COVID patients. the problem with this is that the system that executes the public procurement, which is usually consisted by economists and lawyers, do not exactly understand the subject of the public procurement as such. So these tech companies, in cooperation with their political counterparts, can write whatever they want in the public procurement, and then it is very hard for anyone working within this, let's say, commission for public procurement within the institution to have an oversight whether the subject of the public procurement was actually executed, which leaves a lot of space for basically corruption. So these examples actually lead us into a situation in which the state spent tens of millions of euros, which is a lot of money, which could cover the salaries of many people for a long time from the background of cybersecurity, even could be competitive with the private sector when we speak about this amount of money. But as opposed, this money was spent on existing basically upgrade of a software that was poorly done in the first place. So and there are tens of examples like this that we know, and there are probably many more that we don't know. So that's why I'm saying that rule of law and corruption are a big threat to the infrastructure. Now, in the past, we were basically lucky enough that no major incidents had happened, but that is not something that we can claim now. Albania, a lot of personal data of citizens was leaked. Montenegro, election-related data. Serbia, well, I don't know where to start. North Macedonia had also situations in which, through a different channel, personal data were leaked in various capacities. Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. So all these institutions, basically on one side, they don't have internal capacities, and on the other side, when they try to outsource, they're engaging in corrupt deals. So we end up with a system that's very, very, well, basically fragile. And the worst part of the problem is that these systems hold the most sensitive data for citizens, like health data, or well, when it comes to social security affairs or property data, so different type of data which are not well protected. So I think that what differs us from many countries in the developed world, let's say in the EU, for example, is that I don't think that if such a situation in the EU happened, that the data of all the citizens would leak, that nobody would be held accountable for that, or if that a corrupt deal was revealed, if the relative of two ministers got a tender and didn't deliver what they should, I think that someone would go to jail in the EU. In the Balkans, unfortunately, it doesn't happen as often. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Andrei. Adrian?
Okay, thank you, Bardil. If I understood the question, it was not mainly cybersecurity related, but I'll try to give some answer. The first part of the question was whether teaching and Okay, I will try to explain. So the first thing is that the validation of the knowledge or the diploma is done by the market. And this doesn't matter if you are in Germany or in North Macedonia. The market decides how good someone is or how bad is. And the market has some needs. Labor market in North Macedonia, for instance, does not request any expertise in cybersecurity. So technically, we don't have a need, to be honest. And therefore, a lot of positions that might be open for cybersecurity will remain empty. In terms of software developers, everybody likes software developers. So the young generation will go in those degrees. As for Germany, for instance, it doesn't matter. I believe every student from North Macedonia, because there is a process here, how you get a diploma, how you get the accreditation, how you get all the documents approved by the Agency for Quality and by the Ministry of Education. Since you have these instruments in place, the diploma will be more or less similar, more or less. So it's up to the individual student and his or her skills, and they can get a job in European Union. And we didn't have any problem previously, not just our university, all universities, because there is a process. How can they verify the diploma? The quality, that depends now how much they have studied and how much they have learned. I believe I covered the question.
Thank you, Adrian. Are there any other questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. My question goes both to Andre and Anna. In the respective countries that you represent, does the government store the data only in their own infrastructure, or you also purchase commercial cloud so that the, let's say, private providers also guarantee the resilience of the systems? Thank you.
Yeah, Andre, will you start first, or?
Yes, I mean, I can. Thank you for your question. It is a very interesting question. I don't have an easy answer to that because for the simple reason that the government has a lot of data. So every institution in the government has a very big amount of data on their citizens that they have. As a general rule, when it comes to data protection regulation, the export of this data outside of Serbia is quite restricted, meaning that most of the data should fall under the regime of being held in the country. There are no stipulations whatsoever whether it should be where that should be done by a private institution like private company or a state institution. What we have as a specific example in Serbia, and that is let's say for now the pioneering case in the region, is to make this a state-owned mega data center, which is in Kragujevac in Serbia. So the idea is to have in one spot all the data from all state institutions in the country. It is in the process of integrating, so some of the data have already been integrated, whereas others are yet to be integrated. Now, having said that, I'm sure that some institutions at least have at least some part of their information system that is outsourced. So I'm sure that there is some data of citizens of Serbia that is held even extraterritorially in another country, even though there is a lot of, as I said, legal stipulations when it comes to the protection. The practice is a different question. So those two, unfortunately, don't always go hand in hand. I hope I answered at least some of your concerns.
Thank you, Andre. Anna, although you are from Bosnia and Herzegovina, you are working in Geneva, but do you have anything to add related to this question?
Yes, I mean, I know for Bosnia that there are some ministries who are connected to the Microsoft Cloud, and they store some data in the Microsoft Cloud. But as everything in Bosnia, it's really, there is a lack of coordination, and there's a lack of actually no, I mean, this is a concretely Ministry of Communication that they've said that they use cloud, and they said that they can provide the same services for other ministries, but you know, due to lack of coordination, I'm not sure how many actually institutions use these services. So I mean, there are cases, but this is, as Andre said, it's not really regulated, it's not very coordinated, and somehow happens on the will of, you know, individuals who work in a certain institution. So it's not a systematic. There's no systematic approach to it. Well, unfortunately, I guess, unfortunately. So there are some disadvantages, of course, and we have seen cases. Andre have mentioned as well some of the corruption cases, but also in Bosnia we have seen cases of. Recently, there has been leaked information that 200 government institutions have been using Kaspersky antivirus which is known to have a backdoor and is Russian-funded antivirus. So there was a question on how we came to this point. And as I said, there are already Microsoft licenses and licenses of reliable providers. So yes, these are examples of how each part of the government actually does somehow what they want with the lack of kind of regulatory framework, or even when there is a regulatory framework, lack of coordination with them. So yeah, I gave example of Bosnia because this is something that I know the best, but I'm sure there are similar examples in other countries.
Thank you very much, Anna. And with this, I would like to finish this session. I want to thank our panelists for their insights and for their excellent presentation, and you for your questions and discussion. And I hope we will continue to talk about cybersecurity, the challenges, and what we can do together in order to build cyber resilient communities. It's a complex task, but I know that we will be successful because we have no other choice. Mila, is there anything else planned after this session? Okay. So I close the panel and I close the conference. So I thank you. So thank you for your participation, for your discussion, for your questions. I want to thank all the panelists on all the sessions for their presentations and excellent discussion that we had during these 2 days. As I said at the opening of the conference, we are facing many challenges, but they are not unsurmountable. We can do it. And if I have to highlight some of the challenges, those are, of course, again, related to cybersecurity and building a cyber resilience community. But this is related to also the digital skills. So we have to bridge this digital skills gap, not only education, but also raising awareness, and how resilient and how successful we will be and how strong our society will be depends from each of us. It starts at personal level, and then, of course, it grows towards all the actors within the society. Metamorphosis Foundation will continue to bring issues related to information society development to this digital transformation process, and we will continue to discuss the challenges and, of course, to provide recommendations and solutions. And I'm sure that the only way to do it, as I repeat it constantly, is by cooperation and by sharing resources, by sharing knowledge. And as I said, we have no option. Digital transformation is happening. We cannot stop it. It will be something that is happening now, and it will happen in the future. It's not a process that will end. And we should not take it for granted and hope for the best, but we have to contribute constantly and adapt to the new situations as they arise. Thank you very much. And I also thank the translators for their excellent job, and my team, of course, especially Mila. And I hope to see you on a next event in the near future. Thank you very much.